Well, our conceptual design activities typically start by thinking about the overall shape and form of the building from an architectural and aesthetic perspective. The reality of the situation is that our building must include a certain amount of floor area to meet the program requirements. So we can take our conceptual masses and divide them by levels in a model to approximate the floors that will be created at each level, and then quantify those different floors using a Revit element called a mass floor. Now, mass floors report the key properties of the floors. They report the floor area, they report the floor perimeter and the floor volume, and they also report the exterior surface area of the floor that be created. Now, these properties of the floors can be viewed either individually by selecting different floors and viewing the properties in the Properties palette, or we can look at them tabularly by creating a mass floor schedule. So let's take a look at how we can use mass floors to quantify our project. We'll start by dividing a mass into mass floors. And to do that, you start by selecting the conceptual mass in the drawing area. Then you can open the Mass Floors tool. You'll find that under the Modify Mass tab. In the Model section, choose the Mass Floors tool. And in the dialog that appears, you can choose the levels that you'd like to use to divide that mass. Click OK, and the mass floor elements are created at each of the levels specified. So in the images on the right, you can see the original mass, and then you can also see the mass with the mass floors created at the floor levels that were specified. Having created those mass floors, we can now view information about them in the Properties palette. To do that, select one of the mass floors in the model, and then you can view the properties of that mass floor in the Properties palette. You can see the floor perimeter, the floor area, the floor volume, and also the exterior surface area. And if you'd like to see similar information about a different mass floor, just select that other mass floor in the model, and you'll see its properties appearing in the Properties palette. Now, this isn't a very efficient way of operating, so you may want to create a tabular view that summarizes all that information. And we can do that by creating a mass floor schedule summarizing all the mass floor info. To do that, open the Schedule tool. It appears under the View tab in the Create section. If you pull down the Schedules menu, you can choose Schedules/Quantities. Then you can select Mass, spin that down and choose Mass Floor as the category of elements that you'd like to schedule. Next, you choose the fields that you'd like to display in the schedule, and I recommend choosing the level, the floor area, the perimeter, and the floor volume too. Now, you'll probably want to total that floor area, so I'd add a grand total to the overall schedule, and then switch over to the Formatting tab, where you can choose the floor area, perimeter, and volume as fields that you'd like to calculate totals for. A very useful workflow that you'll probably want to use as you fine-tune the shape of your design is to use the information in the mass floor schedule to dynamically report on the quantities as you push and pull on different surfaces of the building form. To do that, start by just closing all the open windows except for a 3D view that shows the mass floors of the building, as well as another view that shows the mass floor schedule. So just keep those two views open. Then with those two views open, let's use the Tile Windows tool to display them side by side. Under the View tab in the Windows section, you'll find the Tile Windows tool. It has the very convenient keyboard shortcut WT for Window Tile. Once those windows are tiled, you can arrange the views to show the 3D view and the schedule view side by side, kind of panning and zooming as necessary so you can see the information that you want. Then you can select the conceptual mass in the 3D view and reshape it by dragging the blue arrows in and out to reshape and reform that mass. And then as you reshape and reform that mass, notice how the mass floor schedule updates as the form is changed. So you always have an accurate report on just how much floor area and volume you're creating within that building as you fine-tune and arrive at your final shape.